Welcome to a Calvinian architecture. This morning I'm reading from the 6th octave, the 7th chapter. The city is Perinzia, and I'm reading verse 3, which is the story of a dwelling I've wanted to inhabit or construct or buy. Sometimes an imaginary dwelling. This is verse 3. Throughout Melbourne's metropolitan area and beyond that too, I can think of Geelong, Ballarat, Strangways and the Dandenongs, Cape Hatteras, the Peninsula, Frankston, Lorne too. There's a network of public telephones from which over the last 40 years I've made calls, sometimes important calls, on which my very life and those of others depended. Sometimes ones in which I variously organised practical affairs like where to pick up what child or where a particular cricket ground or squash court was situated. I've at times thought that I'd like to get a map and pinpoint them all of them, every single one of them, and then join them up with lines variously coloured to represent the reasons the calls were made, like red for anger and blue for love, yellow for pragmatic reasons, green for melancholy, orange for tears, and so on. And then see what figure might emerge from that network of multicoloured lines, whether the crisscrossing has made any sense, whether it's constructed a body, whether all those urgent reasons for stopping the car, for jingling the change, sometimes for desperately asking strangers if they had a particular coin, has somehow built a figure that from the perspective the years afford, extravagantly generous, isn't it, that particular gift of hindsight that time freely bestows on us when it's least needed, might provide a kind of identikit of one's life, or rather one's reasons for living that life. Jorge Luis Borges inquires as to what might constitute a divine mind when he wonders whether the steps that we take from birth to death trace a figure in time, a figure inconceivable to us, but not, he affirms, not to a divine mind who grasps this form immediately as we might a triangle. This form, Borges then further speculates, might have a given function in the economy of the universe. But putting aside the divine mind for a moment, what about what might constitute ours? I wonder whether arriving at a similar figure by tracing the pattern that might result from recalling the exact location of all the public telephones we've ever used and the reasons why we used them. The ones that we don't remember clearly don't matter. We must allow our selective memories to dictate the terms of the game. Might shed some light on what constitutes each self. Perhaps the resulting figure might also at some point have had its given function in the economy of our lives. I prefer, though, after all, to think of that figure as a kind of architectural plan for a dwelling in time, not in space. I could then sleep in the cocoon defined by the locations of all the calls I made during the 70s, only for pragmatic reasons. Eat within the 80s locations, melancholy calls. Watch TV within the 90s locations, crying calls. And dream within that space created by all the calls that have yet to come, made by tracing together only those phone boxes that I will stand outside of during the rest of my life while holding the coins inside my fist and keeping this fist tightly inside my pocket. Not letting on to other potential users or even to any passerby that I'm waiting to make the call that I most want to make. I'm waiting to make the only call I've ever wanted to make. The call I will never make. Sixth octave, 8th chapter, the city is Procopia, and this is verse 3. The same friend that sent me the George Hotel manifesto, the same friend that watched birds from her tower, has over the years given me many precious gifts. Most of them went unnoticed, and one of the tasks I've set myself to accomplish, in whatever number of years I may still have ahead of me, is to list them all. Write them down, acknowledge them in some way, so that one day I may present her with a full list of them. Each one described in as much detail as I can remember. It feels like the least I can do to reciprocate all that she has sent my way. Sitting on some bank out of sight upriver, she floated a myriad messages to me, trusting that the vagaries of the currents and my hunger for redemption would bring me and the messages together. It's a slow retrieval, this process of sitting somewhere dry, somewhere out of the weather, and combing through the remnants of what I've managed to pull in from the stream. Well, this is something to start with. A first fragment to cement in place. A few years ago, we drove up to Sydney, the car full of things, objects, light fittings, blindfolds, books, to put inside the space of a Sydney gallery. I was preoccupied with what I was doing. I wanted to get there quickly and do it. She made me stop twice. Usually I count the hours and the minutes, all the calculations like average speed, fuel consumption, tyre sounds, swim around in my head, mixed up with future projections of what wall this object will go on and what such and such a light will be fitted to, etc. Well, the first time we stopped was in Albury, late afternoon. I don't know Albury. I've never stopped there. We drove to a little lake and swam for a while. It was painful at first for me to stop. My body and mind were still in the car, racing at 100 kilometres an hour towards Sydney. But I got the feel of the water bit by bit, and I started looking around me. Families were frolicking on the riverbanks, slipping in its muddy slopes into the water. Fathers coming home from work, meeting their wives and kids at the river, lemonade bottles, towels, ice creams. I wanted to get back in the car immediately, but Shelley stopped me. "Just sit down," she said, "and be quiet. You'll be okay." And I was. Much later, towards sunset, we stopped by the side of the road between Gundagai and Takata. We clambered up to the top of the hill and ate the sandwiches she'd made for just this occasion. I'd seen this hill the last time, she smilingly confessed as we looked down onto the violet ribbon that was the Hume Highway, dotted by yellow truck headlights glowing like so many fireflies, emerging from the increasing gloom to the east of us. We sat there in the intermittent silence between the whooshing of the semi-trailers snaking below us until it got dark. Then we clambered down and continued our journey in silence, now and then glancing across to each other to see if we were okay, to see if we were measuring up to whatever it was that was yet far ahead for both of us. But somehow, clearly, relentlessly, on the road, just in front of our speeding car. Thank you. Always just in front of our speeding car. Tomorrow, the 7th octave, the key note is T. First chapter is Raisa.